Hi screen printers, this is Colin from Ryonet. Today we're going to talk about doing Plastisol transfers. I will touch on doing multicolor transfers, but I'm going to focus on single color transfers for this video. Everything I'm going to talk about will relay to anything else that you want to do in the world of doing Plastisol transfers. So one of the first things we want to do is take our transfer paper and we want to run it through our dryer. The reason for that is that paper absorbs moisture from the atmosphere, and we want our paper to be dry. We don't want any of that extra moisture to interfere with what we're doing. So I'm going to take these over, I'm going to run them through our dryer, and we'll go from there. So now that I've pre-shrunk my paper, I'm going to put it underneath our flash, and I'm going to show you why we want to make sure our paper is as dry as possible, because dry paper is stable paper. So this is the paper that we ran through our dryer to pre-shrink. This is the paper that we put underneath our flash and got very hot. And you can see that getting the paper too hot causes some instability in the paper, buckling, ripples, where we want our paper to remain very stable and flat. Keeping the paper stable and flat enables you to do multicolor transfers much easier. If the paper itself moves, that means your ink is moving and your paper will be out of register, even though your screens are not. So even though your paper may be a little bit more buckled, a little bit more wrinkly because it underwent high heat, you can still use it for one color transfers. It's the multicolor transfers where you want to be very careful and very aware of what it is that you're doing. So I'm going to do my one color transfer here. I'm going to talk about what I'm doing as I do it, but let me preface it by saying you do not want to push on the squeegee too hard. If you push too hard on the squeegee, the ink will hit the paper, and because the paper is a solid surface, that ink has nowhere to go except for out the sides. So we need to use just enough pressure to clear the screen, but still keep our stencil edge sharp and clean. So I'm going to flood my screen, and I'm going to do a print. I'm using a 157 thin thread, and I'm using FN ink. So one of the things I want to point out, which is really important when we do transfers, as I related just a little bit ago, we don't want to push too hard on the ink because it can cause that ink to spread out the sides. We also want to make sure that we do not create a deposit that's too tall. I'm going to use a marshmallow analogy, and one of our favorite campfire snacks is a s'more. So we got a graham cracker, we've got copious amounts of chocolate, but we've also got marshmallows. And as that marshmallow goes on top of that graham cracker, and then it's covered up by another graham cracker, that marshmallow, as we know, just squeezes out and oozes over everything. Delicious, yummy gooiness. Well, we don't want to do the same thing with Plastisol ink. So it's very important that we have a controlled ink deposit. You, the printer, are going to need to figure out what works best in your shop for an ink deposit thickness, what mesh count you choose to use, and how thick you choose to coat your screen. This is going to be a little bit of R&D, trial and error on your part. So as we zoom in here, you can see that there is a visible deposit of ink. And I know you're going to say, but I need a certain amount of ink down in order for this to be opaque. Again, you are correct. It's about finding what's going to work best for you. So what I have here is just a simple tray. I picked it up over at Walmart. You can pick it up at Target, doesn't matter. It has a lid that comes with it. I put my powder in here for the purpose of just doing the transfers. And when I'm done, I put my powder back into its container. So all my powder is going to live in here. It is very, very important. We talked about moisture in the paper. Moisture in your powder is just as important. If this powder absorbs any liquid from the atmosphere, for any moisture, it's going to start to behave like pop rocks further down the line. It's not going to be today when it does that. It's going to be an over time thing. So if you leave this out because you forgot you're doing transfers on a Friday, come back on a Monday and it rained over the weekend, you probably want to get rid of this. This is very hydrophilic. It likes water. And you will find that over time, if you leave it out in a humid environment, it's going to get a little granular. It's going to start to look more and more like sand the more you leave it out there. We want this to remain the fine powder that it is when you first get it. If it changes, dispose of it. Start with new. Make sure that you always store it in a dry environment. If you need to put it, once it has water in it, you can't get it out. It's not going to come back out. I'm sorry. So once it's wet, once it's moist, once it's changed its behavior, toss it. Paper will also have a shelf life over time. You cannot bring it back after a few years. The coating itself becomes damaged. These are all things that are very, very important to know. And it's a great way to troubleshoot by going back and seeing how old your stuff is and how well you've kept it. So I'm going to put powder on my transfer. I'm going to dip it in. You're going to see that there's a large amount of powder there. And I'm just going to run it across the ink. You can see that you don't need to do this back and forth. You can. I will do that just to make sure that I've fully coated every side. If you've got a lot of detail, it's not going to hurt you. It's not truly necessary. It's not going to hurt. And then we flick it. Give it little snaps. You can see the powder coming off. You don't want to do this next to your stacks of transfer paper. You want to try and do it away from there. But we're in a small environment right now, so I'm going to flick powder everywhere. And that's it. One of the things to point out, your fingerprints can actually impact the coating that's on the paper. As I've been holding this paper, I have actually imparted fingerprints on it. We can see some of this here. I don't know if the camera's going to catch it, but I can see it in the lighting. If that remains on your paper, you will transfer over a small amount of powder onto your shirt. It's going to discolor your shirt, and it won't necessarily come off in the wash. So be very careful and very aware that powder is on everything here. Be very careful of the oils on your hand, moisture on your hands. Use gloves if you need to keep everything oil-free. Now I'm going to run this through the dryer, and my goal is to do nothing more than gel the ink. Since FN is a low cure ink, my target temperature is no higher than 200 degrees. If I was using a standard cure ink, like our Perfect White, I would shoot for somewhere around 260, maybe 280 on the high end, but the whole point is that the ink is not cured, it is gelled, which means it is flashed in essence. Running it through the dryer is much more consistent than using a flash unit. And I'll talk about that in a little bit here. So now I want to speak to using a flash unit to gel your ink, or to even do multicolor transfers. Using a flash unit is on the dangerous side of doing a transfer because you can't control the cone of heat, the zone of heat that you get out of your flash unit. Right here in the middle is your strongest zone of heat. That means that if you put this, if we put a grid on here that can measure temp, in the middle, we're gonna see this 20, 30, 40 degrees hotter than out here on the outside. I know if I put my hand here, whew, that's warm. I put my hand over here, it's warm, but it's not the same. I can leave my hand here a lot longer. Yeah, I'm ready to move my hand. So your ink is going to behave the same as my hand just did. It's going to go, hey, we're warm right here in the middle. This is the tropics. And over here on the side, you're going to be like, hey, this is Pacific Northwest. We're feeling good up here. Nice and temperature controlled. I can sit here for a little bit. But that means that when you gel your ink, the middle is going to hit gel first and the outside is still going to be wet. And as we're waiting for the outside to hit gel temperature, gel state, that middle is getting closer to cure, closer to being too far towards cure to transfer correctly. That is why we give a lot of warning and a lot of consideration to people who are using a flash unit to create transfers. We want them to be very, very aware that yes, you can do it, but you have to be very careful. You know, you want your flash unit to be higher off the platen than that because you want to have a very controlled zone of heat to apply. Just like on a conveyor dryer, you have a very careful zone of heat within your conveyor dryer. That's why we use them. They're much more consistent. So I'm going to jump off of my soapbox for now, and we're going to go heat press a shirt. All right, so we are ready to do a transfer. We're going to be working with District Made, the DT104 ring spun garment, black, because everyone looks great in black. The settings that we're going to use with the Ryonet paper and the Ryonet powder is about 350 degrees. We're at a middle ground for the pressure, 4 or 5, and I'm going to be pressing for about 10 seconds. Now, your settings in your shop might be different. Your heat press might be different. Your press's ability to be consistent might be different. You might have an older heat press. That's fine. Once you get there, start at a general point and do what you can. Test, play, figure it out. Do wash testing. This is very important to find what's going to work best for you in your shop. Not everyone is the same. So I'm going to load up a shirt. I'm going to place the transfer. And let's see how it looks. So since we're going on a 100% cotton garment, we know that cotton can absorb moisture. So I'm going to do a preheat on it. And the purpose of this is to, one, smooth out any potential wrinkles in the fabric, but also to get rid of the moisture in the fabric. Doesn't need to be long. There we go, that was about 5 seconds. Now I'm going to take our transfer and I'm just going to do the full sheet. This is the one where I had some fingerprints on the paper, and we're going to see what that does as it transfers over the shirt. Normally we might cut this down, create a little notch where the center of the design is, give it some kind of an indicator so that we get it perfectly aligned on the shirt. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to go that deep because I want to show you what the paper can do if you don't get all the powder off. And I don't think I got everything off. All right, as this paper is meant to be a hot peel, within 3 seconds of transfer, you peel it right off. And it's that simple. Ah, yep, there's my fingerprint. So we pull this off, and as you can see, there's a little residue of my fingerprint. All the little things you do add up. All right, screen printers, that's going to do it for today. I know you're going to have a lot of questions about Plastisol transfers. Leave a comment below. We will answer that. Call in to our success line. We'll answer those questions Reach out to us on social media. If you like seeing this content, hit the subscribe button below. Ring that little bell too, so you can get your notifications. Thanks, screen printers. We'll talk to you next time.